Gentlemen, welcome back to the Surplus Bunker. Today we're going to be talking about SIG Sauer, the brand, and we're going to be talking about the P320 pistol. Now, if you've been following all the social media drama, there's been a lot of talk about SIG Sauer's post on their social media platforms the other day, declaring the P320 to be perfect, and anybody questioning the P320 or SIG Sauer is clearly anti-gun. Now, before I unpack that, and I feel I need to tell you a little bit about the background that I have with SIG Sauer pistols and products, because I'm very heavily invested in SIG Sauer. I have numerous SIG products. I had just an endless number of these, right? I've got an SP2022 that's not on camera. I've got an M17 as well. So I have a lot of SIGs, and I've been issued SIGs for work. I've carried them for off-duty details. I've carried them for self-defense. I have probably around 20,000 rounds fired out of SIG products over the last decade. Now, that doesn't necessarily sound like a lot to those of you who might be professional firearms instructors, but of course, the average person, that's a lot of rounds. It's probably more rounds than most people will ever shoot in their entire lives, if we're being honest. Most people don't shoot their guns, and that might be something that SIG kind of accounts for when it comes to the latest guns that they've been producing, which is a bit alarming to say the least. Now, my earliest SIG pistol was a P250, and I really liked that firearm. Turns out around the time that I was interested in it, it was not able to win any contracts, and there were some problems with it in the procurement process and the testing evaluation process. So nobody really picked up the 250 for law enforcement or military use. So of course SIG had to respond to this by jamming a striker-fired design in the 250 and creating the now very controversial P320. So the controversy, is it fair? Is it valid? Well, if we're being objective here, the number of alleged documented cases of these guns going off are, well, fairly limited. However, there have been enough anecdotes of people seeing things occur even at competitions and during law enforcement training that didn't necessarily turn into a protracted legal battle that still continue to at least cause me to not recommend SIG Sauer P320s to anyone right now under the current leadership of the company. And I'll have some links in the description below to some documentaries you should check out if you are not familiar with the controversy surrounding the way that SIG has been run since at least 2008. Now, I noticed a decline in quality around 2013 and after. My SP2022 I acquired in 2013 has been a solid performer. I've literally had zero problems with that firearm, and I have way over 5,000 rounds through it. And I know that because of the amount of ammo I've purchased, the firearms quals, and then just the amount of shooting I've done with that pistol over the years. It has often been featured in the background of a number of different rifle reviews on the channel. So it's been, again, a good performer. Until recently, I will say that it stopped locking back on an empty magazine for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure. I may need to replace a couple parts, might need new mags. Haven't really resolved that. It's been a very low priority thing for me because of all the concern around the other SIG guns. Because even the 365, which has now been the focus of a number of agencies are switching to these, interestingly, especially DHS, the P365 has also not been problem-free. There's been issues with fire pins breaking. There's been other reliability issues and things that definitely make me a little cautious and wary around that. Now, in addition to the pistol experiences that I've had, and we'll talk about the 320s in just a moment, but I've had no issues with the 229. I'll say that the DoD issued 320s have been great, but the rifles, I have a lot of experience with the 5.16. It's very problematic, and it wasn't an example of one of one. It was at least maybe 6 or 8 of them that I observed being fired and then shot many, many thousands of rounds out of. And my observation was that about every 1,000 rounds there was a serious stoppage, the type of stoppage that could not be resolved from immediate action. You had to mortar the rifle, and if you don't know about that process, I have a video here on the channel explaining how to do that. But it was like brass over bolt type malfunctions. It was very unusual. I've never really experienced that in the real world. But it is, you should be familiar with how to mortar an AR-15 style platform like that. But they were just not good. We know recently a number of spears have been arriving to dealers, and the spear rifle barrel has not even been installed to be hand tight. Like, they're canted, you can just move them around by grabbing the muzzle. The quality control is not there. Which brings me to the 320, the elephant in the room, the firearm that everyone's really talking about. The other things I just mentioned, you don't really hear too much about that. But again, I do have a pretty solid opinion due to the round count I have through these firearms and the experience and carrying them on a daily basis. But the 320, this is a Gen 1. I never sent it in for an upgrade because it was my only carry gun at the time. So what was I supposed to do? Go 6, maybe 8 weeks without the gun? I decided I would just replace the trigger with a flat-faced Apex trigger. And I'll tell you, over the course of carrying this pistol, never had a problem. It has dropped, it's fallen. In training, and I've attempted to even create the issue without a round in the chamber, obviously, that people have experienced, and it has not happened. So I do feel that the odds of this occurring are pretty slim, right? Again, to hammer that point, there are so many of these in circulation. That doesn't mean that I trust them, because I resolved what I thought was the problem, and a lot of people thought was the problem was the mass of the trigger. It turns out it's actually a flaw with the design of the fire control unit, and really a flaw with the striker. So they made some changes to the fire control unit and the striker between the Gen 1 and then whatever generation we're on now. I think this is like a Gen 2, maybe a Gen 2.5, because SIG has continued to make changes. We don't know how many changes because they don't document the changes. They don't put them out to the general public. They've changed base plates. They've changed the internal geometry of the slides. There was discussion about law enforcement and civilian dimensions as far as the internals of the slides and things. Like, just weird stuff like that. There may be some disinformation about that too, and it has never been clarified by SIG as to exactly what's going on, and no clarification as to why they were changing the base plates. Now, I think that the base plate changes had to do with the lack of over-insertion stop feature that these pistols have, which actually brings me to an important point. If you have any of these Magpul magazines for the 320, they can be over-inserted. And SIG's fix for that is to simply bend the extractor back into place. Because if you slam a mag home too hard, even with the factory mags, you can bend that ejector rod and the pistol's down. It's just inoperable. It's a paperweight. So that alone for me is a major disqualifier for trusting these as like a serious duty pistol and a concealed carry gun. I do carry extra mags. The probability is low that you would need to reload as a private citizen, but it's there, right? It might be that day where you need to do that. So I don't want to, under stress, end up in a situation where I have slammed that magazine hard and the gun doesn't work. The other issue I found, I mentioned the internal geometry of the slide. So I had a different aftermarket barrel. This is a true precision barrel. And the other aftermarket barrel I had for this, it never worked 100% in the gun. Now, that could have been the manufacturer, could have been a little bit of the hard coating on that barrel, but I found that after swapping it out, this is run 100% with another 2,000 plus rounds out of this gun with no issues. So I think there might be a geometry issue internally. Like, there's just a lack of, again, that's pure speculation. I don't know. But it has run really well since then. I also replaced this with an Agency Arms trigger. And if you're going to carry a P320 for serious use, this is my primary recommendation for trigger replacements. I think this is necessary, and we even know that SIG at one point had actually even put in an advertisement showing that they were going to offer that as a feature, to have a trigger with a dingus. And then they moved away from that, never talked about it again after that particular marketing campaign. To marketing, an important thing to discuss is the way that the leadership of the company have portrayed themselves. And after that 2008 changeover, heading into 2012, 2013, 2015, 16, where, again, we're noticing this downward spiral in the reliability and the quality control and the coatings on the guns. The barrel, the wear on the barrels is more excessive as far as the coatings, in my opinion, from what I've seen. This pistol is a very early 320, and there's almost no polish that's coming across on the camera on the top of this barrel. So the coating even at that time frame for this P320 was pretty good. I don't think the same can be said for what they might be doing now. That's speculative. I don't have another one to compare it to, but I can definitely say that on the civilian M17s that the Cerakote is not as good as the DoD guns. I've handled the DoD 320s, a number of them, repeatedly practiced drawing them in and out of the holster over and over again, and never did I notice slide wear like I have seen on the commercial M17 that I have, where after 30 draw strokes, it was starting to get polished. It's pretty remarkable, actually. And SIG's response when I reached out and said, hey, is there something, what's going on here? They gave me a paint coat. And not long ago, the C-suite guys at SIG said that not all P320s are necessarily created equal. And I'm paraphrasing there, but there was an allusion to the fact that maybe because of where they might be sourcing some of these parts and some other things, because they have a factory in India now, in case you weren't aware. So you might be getting a gun that says made in USA, and this is purely speculation from whistleblowers and a lot of allegations, right? This is all alleged. So be very careful here, right? Because SIG is very, on top of this stuff, because they're very adamant that they're going to end any of this today, was their whole mantra. But it's very possible that your American gun is not as American as you think. And the reason I can kind of point to that is some of the shady business practices that we know about. That's not even alleged. They have altered shipping manifests and documentation to move guns to South America and other places where they shouldn't have been going because of arms embargoes. So think about that. If they're willing to fabricate paperwork or even lie to government procurement agents in countries and say, oh yeah, these SP2022s, they're actually more premium than the normal lineup because there's extra proofing methods that we're using, and then charge them double the amount of money for literally the same gun with no extra quality control or better parts or anything. That's the type of unscrupulous MBA bro type activity that we've kind of come to expect from SIG at this point. And there's going to be a lot of defenders in the comments of this video and all over the internet. I think the tides are beginning to change against SIG and people's opinions around the company from those type of things, and then just concerns around the 320. And again, they've been very reliable and dependable guns for me. But the big element for me, and the reason I'm not going to carry these anymore, one of the fail points seems to be, and this is alleged, if the gun is downward like this, like it's in a holster, that a simple bending of it in the holster, a manipulation, or like force on the back of the slide seems to be enough to detonate the gun. Like it'll just go off. We've seen this happen from officers getting out of their cars. We've seen this from officers who are just seated, people who are standing and put pressure. And if you're needing to retain this firearm, let's say you're a police officer, you're a security guard, whatever, you end up in a scuffle with someone, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pin their hand. And that's going to be downward pressure on the gun. That might send a round into your leg. The odds are slim. The odds are rare. There are so many of these guns in circulation. But there have been enough of these cases, and I'm sure many, many more people will come forward in time. People who either didn't have the funds or they were embarrassed and thought that they did something wrong, and luckily nobody got hurt. There's not necessarily a reason to come forward. They likely either got rid of the gun, or they shelved it, or it was like a fluke and they don't know what happened. Maybe they thought they pulled the trigger, so they just reloaded that firearm and put it in their drawer. Which I think, again, is what SIG is really counting on, is the fact that a lot of people don't shoot often, and a lot of people don't carry, hardly at all. I'm a trained observer. I can tell with pretty high levels of certainty if someone's carrying a gun. I'm very good at it. It's like my one Jason Bourne skill. I'm not really a great marksman. I'm pretty okay-ish, like the upper end of okay-ish, right? I have good qualification scores and everything when I have to qualify for different things. That's never been an issue, but I'm really good at spotting concealed guns, and I can tell you guys are definitely slacking on concealing. So if you're going to carry, you should carry the best gun you can afford. You should carry something that's reliable. You should carry something that has a very proven track record. While these guns are extremely reliable, they do have a proven track record, there is enough concern about their reliability, even from pistol matches and things people have been running from reputable firearms instructors like Ben Stoger, where people have had detonations in the holsters at various IDPA or IPSC events. I had somebody comment over on X about this, that where they had one of their pistols detonate uncommanded, and they sent it to SIG, and SIG sent the gun back and said, we couldn't find anything wrong. Now, going back to the manufacturing end of things and the quality control element, there are 2 bars that they put into these guns, into the newer versions, that are supposed to stop this fully cocked striker from engaging. So when you pull the trigger, this is effectively only a single action gun, where your Glocks and those designs are technically a double action gun because the striker is half cocked. So there are other people out there who can explain the engineering and how that all works much better than myself. But the point is, there are more mechanisms in the way to stop that firing pin from moving. And if the quality control is not just right on these, that's where we find ourselves in a situation where perhaps both of the safety mechanisms in this are failing. So simply, as I pointed out, replacing the trigger, it's not going to resolve that problem, right? There is an internal design flaw issue from the lack of over-insertion stop to the actual striker design. And for that reason, as of now, until SIG eventually comes forward, either they're forced to, or along the way, and I'd submit they're going to discontinue the P320s, because we're seeing them be shelved right now by federal law enforcement agencies, and they're carrying these 365s, which, again, there are problems with these too. I think they're going to phase out the 320 quietly. They're going to try to avoid a lot of the litigation, but the thing is, there's so many of these firearms in circulation, and there's so many that are going to be phased out by police departments over the next 10 years. There will likely continue to be an incredible amount of problems. And many of the problems that have been allegedly documented by whistleblowers, there is a documentary, a link below as well, where he alleges that the more rounds that they're putting through these guns, the more stoppages, they're having very high rates of stoppages out of the 320s, and it gets to the point where the components no longer are working together correctly, right? So the probability of these drop tests, or them failing the drop tests, may even increase, allegedly, the more you shoot them. So it may not be an issue that presents until you've owned this gun for 10 years and you've just repeatedly trained with it, and you got to that point where, well, now a little backward pressure on it was enough to make it detonate, right? So just some thoughts there on the 320 and SIG, and unfortunately, until SIG cleans up its act, I can't recommend their products to you, and I take that very seriously, even with my small reach here on YouTube. And this is a great platform for sharing information. I really like being on this platform and able to discuss this stuff with you guys, because this is life-saving equipment. This is not a joke. This is not something that anyone reviewing this stuff should take lightly. And anyone who's getting paid to promote this stuff, you really need to ask yourself if they're worth continuing to watch. And I'm not saying that some of their content's not fun and entertaining, but if they're not asking tough questions and being critical of this stuff, because I'm willing to criticize these firearm manufacturers, because a lot of them are shipping lemons, a lot of them are shipping stuff that really just doesn't work right from the factory, which, again, back to the SIGs, they've all worked 100% for me, with the exception of the aftermarket barrel issues that I had with the X-Carry. Other than that, guys, if you want an old SIG, find one that has like a West German frame, ideally like truly old, right? 30, 40 plus year old pistols. You'll be good to go, and you'll have a great time with your 229s, your 226s. I would actually like to get a 229. I do even personally like the double action Kellerman setup on the 229s. I think they shoot quite nice. I know a lot of people probably won't like those, but this stuff is available at a pretty low price point. So if you're dead set on SIG, find an old one. Anyway, guys, share your thoughts, comments below. Do you carry a 365? Do you carry a 320? Do you trust these guns? Do you think I'm just completely out there and I'm just wrong? Tell me why in the comments. Thanks for watching.